Welcome, everyone, to our Salon number 78, The Gift of Change in Times of Vengeance, Domination, and Environmental Devastation, with Starhawk and Phyllis Karat in the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by Genevieve Vaughn and the International Feminists for a Gift Economy. We are so happy that you're with us today. This is exactly the kind of conversation we need in these very challenging times. I'm Letitia Layson, your moderator. Our first speaker today is Starhawk. She is an author, activist, permaculture designer, and teacher, and a prominent voice in modern earth-based spirituality and ecofeminism. She's the author or co-author of 13 books, including The Spiral Dance, Rebirth of Ancient Religion of the Great Goddess, and the ecotopian novel, The Fifth Sacred Thing, and its sequel, City of Refuge. Starhawk teaches permaculture through earth activist training and a grounding in spirit and a focus on organizing and activism. Welcome, Starhawk. Phyllis Karat is a spiritual pioneer, one of America's first public witches, teachers, and advocates. She spent more than 40 years helping witchcraft become the fastest growing spirituality in America, expanding its reach across the globe. Phyllis is an attorney whose groundbreaking cases secured the legal rights of witches, including the right to form religious organizations, perform legally binding marriages, perform rituals in public spaces, and have religious holidays off from work. Also supported people in retaining custody of their children or wearing or displaying symbols of faith and more. Phyllis is also an internationally best-selling author and most widely published witch and Wiccan priestess in the world. The creator of the acclaimed Witch's Wisdom Tarot with artist Danielle Barlow. Her YouTube series, What is Wicca, has 3 million views, and her online course, Awaken the Witch Within, has helped countless speakers discover and deepen their practice of witchcraft as a modern rebirth of Euro-Indigenous wisdom traditions. Welcome, Phyllis. And now I'm going to turn the mic over to Starhawk.
Hi, everybody, and good morning. I'm speaking to you this morning from the land that's the traditional lands of the Ramaytush Ohlone, a place called Yelamu, otherwise known as San Francisco. And I really like this tradition of honoring the indigenous people of the land because it reminds us again of the history of the land, both the sad history of colonization, but also that the indigenous people in so many places are still here. And that is very true here in the Bay Area, where the Ohlone, when I was in school, we were taught that they were all gone and extinct, but that's not true at all. They were removed to Southern California, and in recent years, they have returned. And actually, I've been able to participate sometimes in ceremonies with them here on this land, and they have a very active um, community um, of land back in the Bay Area with a land trust called the Segurite Land Trust, where they encourage people to pay a voluntary tax called the Shumi land tax to help give them the financial resources to buy back some of their traditional land. So to me, that's one of the very hopeful things that has been going on in the past few years. As you've probably noticed, we're in a really terrible time right now, and there's no making it pretty or nice or reassuring. It is a very, very devastating moment that is going to result in pain and suffering and death for thousands and thousands of people, not just here in the US, but all over the world, and already is. And one of the things I do a lot is to teach permaculture design. And I have to say, there's a quote from Bill Mollison, who was one of the originators of this whole movement of ecological design, that I think of over and over again. He said, evil is stupidity rigorously applied. And that has never been so obvious as it has over the last couple of days here in the US. But what I want to focus on is what we can do about it and how we can organize, and to maybe try to delve a little bit deeper into um, what are some of the underlying patterns here that I think I look at through a feminist lens, and I'm sure many of you do, but that aren't always being talked about in that way. Um, because I think that so much of what we're seeing now ultimately goes back to questions of how we view masculinity and femininity, what we call male and what we call female. And I think probably many of you have been involved in feminist movements for a long time, maybe as long as I have, which is more than half a century, and have lived through the tremendous revolution in the late 60s and the 70s, when we kind of woke up and said, oh, we as women are an oppressed class, and started to delve into all of the underlying philosophies and ideologies that were part of that. And a lot of that is how a certain set of values have been assigned to women and another set of values have been assigned to men. So that all the values of caring and nurturing, um, of looking over after the welfare of future generations, um, of compassion, of softness, all of those things were assigned to women, and aggression and power over and command and control, and also along with it things like innovation and invention and mind are have been assigned to men and overvalued, while all the caring values have been devalued. And we very much see that in the context of what's going on right now, where there's this upsurge in the ideology of kind of traditional masculinity in some of its most toxic forms, and a devaluing of everything that provides care. And this is now being enacted literally in the federal budget, and the defunding and the destruction of every federal institution that actually cares for people and provides for people. You know, we've seen that first with USAID, that's resulting now in potentially millions of deaths around the world by defunding programs that actually feed starving children and that actually have been tremendously effective at addressing AIDS and healthcare crises and pandemics. And we see that in the attempts to defund things like Medicaid and everything from the National Endowment for the Humanities and for the Arts to the healthcare and the public health system and on and on. I'm sure I don't have to go on and tell you all about that. And ultimately, the attacks on Social Security and other things that provide care for people, all in the name of further enriching people who already have more than enough money to satisfy any of their reasonable needs. So we have to, I think, counter that by reminding people of our feminist analysis. But I think we have to do that. I think we have too often been somewhat essentialist about it. I don't actually believe so much that women are inherently more caring, um, or that if we are on some biological basis, it's outweighed by what the culture tells us to be and how the culture tells us to respond. And I don't believe that men are inherently aggressive and, you know, power mad. Again, it is something that they are culturally conditioned to be. And there's actually some very interesting studies about testosterone that I ran across in when I was doing my recent writing. I've been writing a book on Substack, chapter by chapter, that you can find at starhawk.substack.com. Um, and there's a book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky that looks at human behavior from every level, from the genetic to the hormonal to the cultural. Um, and it taught me something about testosterone that I didn't know because I always thought testosterone made men more aggressive. But actually, he says, is that what the studies really show is that testosterone makes men or people in general more aggressive only if they already tend to be aggressive. Um, and mostly in response to the threat of a status loss. Uh, and that the impact of higher levels of testosterone is very much related to what the culture tells you to do to maintain status. So if you're in a culture that says you maintain your status by being aggressive and yelling and shouting and blustering and all of that, then testosterone will increase that. If you're in a culture like, say, one of the indigenous cultures of the Pacific Northwest, a potlatch culture where you gain status by how much you can give away, then testosterone will increase your generosity. So I thought that was very interesting. That was, again, very different from what we usually think of when we talk about testosterone poisoning. And it brought home to me how important it is the set of cultural values that we choose. So I think we need to be organizing, talking, um, and providing for people a clearer moral framework for contesting what's going on right now. Because the right wing frames things that way constantly. But the left wing, we tend to frame things in terms of policies and data and other things that are important. Um, but we don't have a hell to threaten people with. Although you look around certain people and you kind of wish we did. Maybe it would be comforting to think they would get theirs in the end, if not right now. and we don't have something as clear and solid as patriarchal Christianity. But we do have a set of profound moral values, and they go back again to how we value those things that have been traditionally assigned to women. And I think our morality says everything is interrelated, and this is a value that comes from understanding that we are part of the natural world. It's very much linked to those pagan values and Wiccan values that Phyllis and I have been talking about and writing and that for many, many years. That everything is interconnected and interrelated. And because of that, it's like we have a duty of care for other people, for other beings, for the natural world, for the community and the people around us, for people who don't look like us and think like us. And that valuing that care, providing that care itself is a form of strength. Strength is not just how much you can control other people or how much harm you can do to other people. It is actually how much you can provide for and nurture and um, show connection and compassion to other people. And that kind of reaffirming those values is the moral ground that we stand on. I also think we have to organize by looking at people as they are and understanding what are some of our basic needs. And that's the writing I've been doing most recently. I have been writing a book on Substack chapter by chapter, and it is looking at some of our core needs as human beings. So let me see if I can. So I've been thinking about 5 core needs that we have. There's the need to be safe, to feel like we belong to something bigger than ourselves, to be seen and valued, to have agency, to feel like we are making an impact on the world, that we have some power, and finally to have a sense of meaning and purpose, to make sense of the world. And I kind of started to think about this because I was pondering why the rise of the right, what is so attractive about the MAGA movement. And I think it's because it meets these needs. It does it in very destructive ways, but it sets up a strong man and says, put your faith in Trump and he will make you safe. It also inflames the dangers of the world and says he's the only one who can keep us safe from them. It gives people a tremendous sense of belonging. You go to the MAGA rallies and you're part of this big thing and you wear the hats, and um, it tells people you are valued, especially those people where we've been trying for decades to say, hey, you're not the only ones who have value in the world. Just because you're male, just because you're white, that doesn't make you super valued. Um, but the MAGA movement says, well, actually, you are valued because you're white, and those other people are not valued. Uh, and they're trying to take your value away from you. It defines value as kind of a zero-sum game, and if someone else has it, you can't have it. Um, It gives people a sense of power because they can ally themselves with this very powerful figure. And they can use their power by bullying and by taking things away from other people. And it makes sense of the world. You know, it's a terrible sense, we would think, but um, it gives people a sense of meaning and purpose. And all of those conspiracy theories from QAnon on down, I think, do something of the same. They say, here's a simple framework for seeing the world. Uh, and, the real part of the world, what you actually see with your eyes and what's actually going on in front of you is not the real reality. There's a hidden reality, manipulated by very powerful people, but you are special because you see through it and other people don't. I often think we're not very good at meeting those needs. We tend to make people feel unsafe, even in our very attempts to create safety in movements. Um, and like their belonging is conditional on never saying the wrong thing or never offending the wrong person. Um, we aren't often great at articulating, like I said, a real coherent moral vision that makes sense of the world. Um, again, we condition people's value too much on following a political line, and we, political activism is inherently frustrating because you're trying to make these things happen and they don't happen, or if they do happen, it often takes years and decades. And then they get undone. So having a sense of agency and power can be really difficult. So these are just some of the questions I'm suggesting for people around these. Like, how do we frame safety? I don't know if you've ever been in a group where someone has said, well, we're going to have a safe space policy. So in this policy, we will not tolerate racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, transphobia, and anyone who violates one of these things will be immediately asked to leave. We will believe survivors, um, anyone who transgresses will be ejected. And the problem is we're framing safety as a set of rules and punishments, which is an inherently unsafe frame because sooner or later we're all going to make a mistake. We're all going to violate that. I like to frame our safety agreements in a positive way, and this comes both from our magical traditions where we say, you can't cast a spell by saying what you don't want. You have to say what you do want. You can't do a love spell by saying, great goddess Aphrodite, don't send me another rotten lover like the one I just got rid of, because what's in your mind then is that rotten lover. You have to visualize the kind of relationship you want, find something concrete that represents that can activate your emotions, and focus on that. So I suggest something more like saying, hey, we want everyone to feel safe here. We want everyone to feel welcome and valued. Um, we like sex. We think sex is a good thing, but we also know it's a place where a lot of people carry huge wounds and sensitivities. So who here is willing to be an ally for someone if something comes up that's disturbing or that's uncomfortable? And most of the time, everybody raises their hands, people look around, and they feel like they have support instead of feeling like, I'm going to make a mistake. So um, I'm going to have to go through these a little more quickly, but we have to think about what kinds of agreements we want to make, and do they really leave room for people in all of our fallible humanness? When we think about belonging, you know, starting by sharing what are our core values. Again, there's been a number of studies that have shown that if you want to create a sense of belonging in a group, starting by asking people what they value is a really important step. Welcoming the whole person, finding ways to actually create entrance rituals and exit rituals, having mentors, buddies, uh, doing things to connect on more than just the work level. Again, having people be seen and valued, like seeing the whole person, not just seeing someone as a representative of a certain identity or as a piece of work you can get out of them, but really seeing them as a full human being. Um, Giving people chances to make a contribution, to feel like they've made an impact. So it's not just what the demonstration's going to do, it's going to be how you can contribute to making that happen. And having many ways so people with different capacities can make a contribution. Um, Making sure you invite people into creative work, not just the drudgery, and finding clear paths to power in the group, um, and opportunities for leadership. And then meaning, again, making sense of the world, as I said, having a moral vision and a vision of the world we want to create. Um, you know, Political organizations used to spend a lot of time developing their philosophy and ideology, and now we don't tend to do that so much. And in some ways, that's probably a good thing. But I think we do need to do enough of that. So again, people feel like they are part of something that puts the world together in a meaningful way, that has a clear mission, and that can make sense of both success and failure, good and evil, those big questions like death and life. So um, I think I've probably gone on longer than I intended, but I'll just say I am writing about that at starhawk.substack.com. I've been, doing some of the organizing to respond to this moment. Um, the pagans have been organizing, and we have a group that's connected to a website now called pagansolidarity.us. I'll put them all in my chat, in the chat, in a minute. And I'm also doing a lot of writing and teaching about permaculture and social permaculture with earthactivisttraining.org. I'll be doing an online course starting on April 16th on creating ritual and magical tools for these challenging times. Um, so our earth activist training, when we teach permaculture, we do it with a grounding in spirit and a focus on organizing and activism. And we are able to offer diversity scholarships for Indigenous folks and people of color. Um, we're hoping this year to do with our fundraising to also be able to offer scholarships for people like displaced federal workers and young people who are activists, because I think permaculture gives people an opportunity to really learn the hands-on part of believing the earth is sacred, and a set of tools for regenerating land and community. So I'll stop now and turn it over to Phyllis.
Taking notes, lots of notes. Um, so we need like 10 hours. That was enormously useful and fruitful, I think,
Hmm.
for everybody listening. And it is the perspective that is formed from years of commitment and experience, and is infused with deep values. So I want to add on to it from a slightly different angle that's consistent, I think. The words value, what do we value? The question, what do we value? And meaning, these are the fundamental questions that we all struggle with. And I want to reflect on it in the context of the question that was asked, which has really been compelling for me, the idea of the gift of social change in the midst of chaos and devastation and destruction. Gifts come in strange packages, right? And if you'd asked me if this was the delivery system that I would like, the answer would be no. I would prefer the one that Starhawk has enumerated. But it comes as it comes. So I think my perspective is informed also by a long period of work and the values that have come out of that. And there's overlap, certainly, and I'm going to try to address it from this slightly different, congruent, but slightly different angle. So the framework, to me, the perspective from which I'm able to navigate what's happening right now is the blessing of, my gosh, more than 45 years now, an entire adult life as a student, and in a position of real sort of humbleness of trying to relearn what's been forgotten and retrieve what's been lost. And essentially, I mean, it took me a long time to sort of get the vocabulary for it, and some people don't like it, but to me, I think it's accurate, and that is that this is a process of re-indigenizing ourselves, of retrieving what's been lost, of what was suppressed, of what was broken, of what was, before we did this to other indigenous peoples, we did it to ourselves. And it was done specifically through the agency of the persecution of women that took place for hundreds and hundreds of years. And that was the process of destroying the vestiges, the remnants of our own indigenous wisdom traditions. And the resurgence for me I was part of that second wave feminist movement, which was part of my ability to overcome the stereotype of the Wicked Witch, because in her, I actually found like the ultimate feminist icon. And as I began to sort of learn and work and do shamanic work, I began to recognize that what we were in the process of doing was rediscovering and rebirthing modern form appropriate to who we are at this moment in time and the challenges that we face and who we are, the values that we have, right? But that we were rebirthing what had been attempted to be obliterated. So the framework for rediscovering meaning and values is through the retrieval of our indigeneity, which is our proximity to the earth, our humility in the face of the smallness of who we are in this vast web of wisdom, and that the things that we're seeking, healing, well-being, how to live in a sacred way, because we've rediscovered that in fact we're living in a sacred world, how to behave in a sacred manner, because we've had that epiphany, that illumination. We are, and we've had a period of sort of peace and prosperity where we could sort of stand in the face of patriarchy and say, yeah, I'm a witch, you know, and say it knowing that they weren't going to come and burn down our houses. They might, you know, try to fire us, and we'd use legal tools, but, you know, they weren't going to take us away. And now it's kind of a different situation, and it isn't just us, right? So where are we? We're at this moment, which seems to erupt periodically, like every 75 years or so, of this psychopathology of patriarchy, where it loses its shit, excuse my vulgarity, but what else can you know, I mean, I could use worse words and I wouldn't even begin to touch on how awful it actually is, right? That the perversity of it, the permission for it, the structures that have allowed it and in fact encouraged it, you know, with the structures have come out of a patriarchal model and reinforce it and elevate it and permit it. And so it, you know, it reaches these points of acute violence and cruelty, and the propaganda and the lies that have been used to perpetuate it, you know, like, we'll keep you safe and your lives have meaning and purpose and you are seen and you are, you know, all of those lies are made transparent because in fact you're not, you're simply fodder and tools and a means of achieving the power and the wealth and the absolute authority of these psychopaths that our systems tend to shoot to the top of the pyramid, right? I mean, we've created these systems that honor the people least capable, the men, unfortunately, usually, but not exclusively. I mean, we've got a fascist prime minister, right, who's a woman in Italy right now, and Marie Le Pen. I mean, that we've created systems over thousands of years that reward the worst impulses and that exaggerate them, that foster them and reward them, and that periodically, right, that need for control, that fear of death, that fear of the feminine, that separation from the world, right, that madness overtakes the entire species and destruction reigns. And here we are right now, right? The Second World War, and now, you know, we're replicating all of this stuff with, as Starhawk was articulating it, right, with this right-wing structure, the implementation of the policies of 2025, which seek to take us back to the so-called golden era when you had child labor and women didn't have the vote and you had, you know, strange fruit, you had murders of Blacks and Italians and Jews, and all the contradictions of our culture. And here we are again. And each time this spasm erupts, right, and destroys what little bit of civilization we have, our art, our culture, our tolerance, our laws, our, you know, our value, our enlightened values, blah, blah, blah. You know, we come through it, obliterating everything in sight. And the madmen end up, as they always do, shooting themselves in bunkers or hanging by their balls in the Piazza Navona, you know, because it never ends well for these guys, which they don't seem to, it just never ends well for these guys. And we look around and we go, oh, that was a mistake. Let's create the League of Nations. Let's create the United Nations. All of these things express a kind of longing for peace and cooperation, etc. But we never quite get to the root of healing what's wrong. And so we repeat the pattern. And so I think that part of the gift that an Indigenous perspective can offer, and to me, there's incredible importance in the recognition that we have our own ancestral Indigenous wisdom tradition, so that we're not appropriating and misappropriating the wisdom and the traditions of other people, because it's a sort of a continuation of this old model of appropriation and exploitation. It's still external. There are things to be learned, but cannot be taken, because you have to make that journey yourself. So this moment of destruction has, as it always does, it has this potential. I mean, it's terrible that we seem to need to do this in order to release these tensions and make these little incremental moments of progress that are never sufficiently rooted in the reality that is in fact what we need to be rooted in. But the gift of the gift of change, I'm going to take it away from social change and just talk about change, because I think the change, I mean, I used to hear this and resent it because I was a social justice activist, right? But in fact, the change does have to begin in this very personal and intimate way for it to be able to be coherent and have influence in a social setting and to begin to have an impact. Otherwise, things remain, I think, abstract. So the gift of this moment of destruction, despite the sacrifice and the damage and the terrible things that it's going to do, which don't justify it, but this is just a fact, right? Is that in that moment of destruction, a crack opens in the lies and the structures and the delusions and the propaganda, right? And the beliefs that have been encouraged that this will make you safe and this will give you meaning and this is what, and that breaks. And reality comes in stark contradiction to the lies and the propaganda and what people have been told, right? As a means of controlling them and misdirecting their efforts, their anger, etc. In a small example, we sort of saw with the war in Iraq, right? Which went on and on and on, and weapons of mass destruction, and finally, the American public sort of woke up after all of this devastation and death and terrible stuff, and they woke up and they went, "Wait a minute, it's not true. This isn't true." Part of which has been exploited, ironically, right, by the right and used in their alienation. You can't trust your government, and you can't trust these people, and you can't trust the deep state. Okay. So here we are in this moment of contradiction between what we've been told to believe in and what we've been told is true, and never has propaganda been more, sort of skillfully put out into the bloodstream and had effect on people as now. But the reality now is contradicting the lies, right? So what happened last week has obliterated the financial well-being of 60% of Americans who have 401ks. They don't have pensions anymore. They have 401ks, which is a whole other conversation about how that was manipulated, right? But there you are. And so people look at that and go, wait, it's not working. It's not working for me. Medicaid is being done away with in order to provide a $5 trillion tax break to the oligarchs and the wealthiest people. So in that moment when people in red states go for medical care and cannot receive it, the reality contradicts the propaganda. And so that moment, horrific as it is an opportunity, right, to escape from the delusions and the propagandas and these 1,000-year-old patterns and structures and hierarchies of repression and control. And so we can escape through those cracks, right? So that's our job. And there are so many ways, of facilitating the escape, One is through organizing and returning to the wisdom of feminist critiques, and very much, I think, the wisdom that to me is sort of most valuable right now, which is the wisdom of the earth itself, which you framed, if it was you, Genevieve, who wrote the description of the point of this conversation, right? From this perspective of not just the maternal gift giving that humans experience at that first moment of birth, but that from the human point of view, once we're liberated, once the blindfold comes off, that's been tied on, right, by history and by habit and propaganda and conditioning and rewards and punishment. Well, when it comes off, what we see is that it isn't just at that moment of birth and nurturance with our mothers, but it's going on all the time, because the earth is our mother. And so the wisdom that indigenous peoples had came from their proximity, the intimate relationship that they had with their Mother Earth. They recognized her as mother. They recognized the blessings that she afforded them of life. And they were great, and people were grateful, right? And so the question now is, like, how do we re-indigenize ourselves? How do we retrieve that wisdom? How is that possible? And the answer, I think, is yes, because I think the values that we're seeking are embodied by the natural world. That our capacity to recognize them and to experience them is possible because it's encoded. You had the spiral, right? With the golden mean. It's encoded in our DNA, like it's encoded in the DNA of all life. What is it, like 96% of DNA is shared by all things, like a rose and a human being? I mean, this is, so we escape from these crumbling towers of mirrors that, are all reflections of us. We know everything. We're at the top of the pyramid. We're, our brilliant minds, we're in control. We initially because God told us, and now because we're hyper rational, right? We have science, and so we have AI, so we can know all things. So this is the moment of escape, and this is the moment where we're free to change. And the guidance, I think, for how to change, like literally how to change, and what to change into, is available. It's accessible. It's natural. As much as the fascism of these psychopathological dictators, right, is unnatural, the breaking of their systems is natural, because you don't have hoarding in nature. When you get that, right, in fact, it breaks. Just like these systems always break. They think they're going to live forever, oh, you're going to be in a bunker with a gun. It doesn't work. So what's natural? We're separated from it. We've been separated from it for 5,000 years. We live, you can't unenmesh yourself from it. We're using the internet, and we're burning energy and the internet, right? So we're enmeshed. But in fact, we're not just enmeshed in these distorted human systems. We're enmeshed in a larger system, and that's the natural world. And every minute that we're alive, we are being gifted. That your epiphany, your brilliance, Genevieve, in the articulation of this, is that it's an experience available to us, not just at the moment that we're born, from which men are always trying to separate themselves because they're overwhelmed by their mothers, right? That it's happening all the time. And there are various ways to rediscover what's been forgotten and to return. One is just to be in nature, your garden, the park next door, certainly wilderness. One of the, you were talking about studies, and one of the most wonderful things that, keeps coming up is that when humans are in nature, human nature becomes better. We become calm, right? Our cortisol levels and our stress levels drop, our heart rates go down. We feel a sense of peace. We may not, for those who are not familiar with the meaning of those experiences, they're feeling it nonetheless. They feel it in their bodies. They feel it emotionally, right? We don't go to inner cities for our vacations. We go to the most beautiful places that we can afford, right? We need instinctively to be in the natural world. The other thing that has been discovered, which I think is also linked to this idea of this true dynamic of the gift, is that when people are in nature, they become altruistic. They become remarkably, spontaneously, powerfully altruistic, where they will risk their lives to save the life of another person or an animal, right? They suddenly, what is drawn forth in them is this compassion and caring and sense of connection that where they'll place their own lives at risk to save the lives of another, which is probably one of the most, both a mother's instinct, but also a father's instinct, right? The guardian to protect life, that impulse. So going to nature helps us restore ourselves, this lost part of ourselves, and these profound values that can remake the way in which we're living. But there are other ways. The last few years of my work, and when I'm writing about and what I'm trying to teach, was what was taught to me, which was through this epiphany, that we're constantly being gifted everything that we need to lead lives that are meaningful, that are happy, and that are healthy, that have purpose. And that those gifts are gifts that are shared with all living creatures by Mother Earth, that's this interconnected, interdependent web that you're talking about, Starhawk, that all of life participates in this gifting, and it's a reciprocal exchange that's going on all the time, of the energies that create and sustain life, and that we're exchanging them, and that we can experience it with something as simple as breathing. So it's not an idea, but becomes an experienced reality, right? That we can rediscover ourselves enmeshed in this web where the energy of life is abundant and being offered, and that we learn how to recognize it, receive it, and when we're consciously aware and engaged in that process of accepting the gift, that our minds open, our hearts open, our bodies are given life, but so are our spirits. And the desire to give back is instinctive. It's not rooted in a capitalist modality of exchange. If I give you this, you'll give me that, and I'll make some money. It's rooted in gratitude and communion and astonishment, awe, the thing that you get when you go into nature, that it evokes awe and altruism, and you can recognize that you're not just receiving, you're also returning, you're giving. So it's not just a duty of care, it's a desire. It's a desire to care. That's very maternal, but also, you know, can be paternal, right? It doesn't have to be distorted masculinity. It can be this healthy this natural not this unnatural, but this natural masculinity. So I just want to take a second and just ask you to do this with me for 1 minute, so it stops being words and ideas, and maybe for a minute is an experience. Because for me, when I experienced it, even though I'd been practicing for 25, 30 years at that point, suddenly everything shifted, and it went from an idea, which I love, and words, which I love, to a reality that I had experienced and that was true, and that had within it all these wise ways of living that the earth knows and teaches all of her children, that all of her children know instinctively how to live in the ways that make them healthy and happy. So they're participating in this natural abundance. They don't take any more than what they need. They are always giving back in return for what they've been given. There is a sense of abundance, and most importantly for us, because we have this consciousness where we're always thinking about, right, and responding emotionally, there's this recognition that every breath we take is an exchange, is a receiving of a gift of the breath of life that's created for us by the plants. There's no waste in the natural world. They create oxygen. They metabolize oxygen as they're creating their own energies to live and to grow. And they exhale oxygen, which we inhale. So they're breathing with us. Every breath that we take, we're receiving the gift of the breath of life from the plants. Okay. And when we exhale, we're not, I mean, I was taught initially as a baby witch many, many years ago, you know, okay, inhale and grow calm and quiet and still. Now exhale the garbage and the tension and the toxins of the day, you know, and we'd all go, yeah. Exhale all that terrible stress from your boss and your boyfriend and blah, blah, blah. And I was doing that, and the trees were like, please stop. Just don't do that anymore. Just stop doing that. It's like, of course, because there's no waste in nature. And they said, just breathe with us. So I breathed with them. And the epiphany was, after the quiet, after the mind settles, as the clean air comes in, as that moves through you, what you realize is that you've been given the gift of the breath of life, and that when you're exhaling, there's no waste, there's no garbage. Your body is metabolized carbon dioxide, which is the breath of life for the plants. It's what they require to live. And so every single breath is the giving of the gift of the breath of life and the receiving of the breath of life. And each breath is binding us in this web of connection. And it's not an idea, it's an experience. And so nature doesn't have to be out in the wilderness or even in your garden. It's immediate with every breath that you're taking, no matter where you are. And so I just want to do that with you. If you don't, can I do that, Genevieve, for 2 minutes? Yeah. So if you just close your eyes for a minute, and I'll just talk you through it. Because every breath we take is an exchange of the gift of life, and the divine is always just a breath away. So this is the teaching of the trees that was given to me when I was in a deep depression, and they told me to breathe with them. And so we close our eyes, we take a deep breath in, and another one out, just simply breathing in and out, with each breath coming in, allowing our mind to settle. And with each breath that leaves our body, allowing our bodies to relax and to drop into center. And we breathe in, and the mind does become clear. and quiet, and we breathe out, and the body rests and relaxes. And we breathe in and out, growing still and calm. And bring our attention, which has now been freed, to feel the breath of life entering us, filling us with life and energy and blessings. And as we exhale, we recognize that our bodies have created the breath of life for those that create the breath of life for us. We inhale and receive from the green plants, the green beings who live with us, the breath of life they create for us. And our minds open and our hearts open. And we receive this gift of life that flows through us, and gratitude erupts in us. And as we exhale, it is gratitude that we send with the breath of life to the plants who breathe with us, receiving the breath of life we've created for them, and returning for us the breath of life they've created for us, inhaling and receiving, exhaling and returning, inhaling and receiving, exhaling and returning. The gift of the breath of life, the gift of life itself, flowing between us, blessing us, awakening us, reminding us who we are and where we are and why we are here. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Receive and return. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So you don't have to be a witch, right? You could be a monk. You could even be a Catholic priest, because everybody's breathing, including the plants. And the meaning, right, becomes apparent when we bring ourselves fully into that relationship, right? It makes our lives meaningful. And then I think for me, the experience that I've had from how my heart opened and how my mind recognized and how deeply grateful I was, how utterly natural that the desire to give back as I was given to was natural. The desire to care was natural. The relationship was natural and easy. No hoarding, no waste, abundant, flowing, reciprocal offering and exchanging of this breath of life, this gift of life. It's really true. It doesn't have to be a spiritual epiphany, right? It's just practical. It's just true. It's just true. It's scientifically true. If you're a hyper-rationalist, it's still true. but as the heart opens and the mind recognizes, what I experienced was that the divine really is not just a breath away, but a breath received and returned. And it's just one of the gifts of life that we're constantly being given by Mother Earth. It's just one. And so her values, I think, then more naturally become ours when we recognize, when we experience this gifting that she's giving us. And it's easy then to seek the ways of living in harmony with her, right? To learn, she's the teacher, and so we learn from her. It's her wisdom that we're studying, that is guiding us. It's the wisdom we've forgotten, but it's written in our bones. It's in our nature. It's in our nature. And so the gift of this crisis, right, is the breaking of control and the chance to escape it and to begin to remember who we are and where we are and why we're here. And what our purpose is, how to care beyond creating the breath of life for the plants, what other jobs we have, what other gifts we have to return can be the very beautiful task of what comes next. And I think we have a good teacher. I feel well taught. So thank you for giving me this chance to share what I learned. And thank you, Starhawk, because I think your framing is wise and incredibly useful. And I hope this has been useful to people.
Thank you, Phyllis. That was beautiful. So everyone, we're going to be shifting now into a little bit of time for questions and answers and communication. And I'm going to check in with Jen to unmute my friend. And is there something that you want to share with us all?
Yes, thank you both so very much. It's a wonderful gift that you've given to everyone for the in your thinking and speaking. I want to say that as a moral question, we have to maybe put that aside and realize that we are a maternal species. We are a gifting maternal species. We are not Homo sapiens because we don't realize who we are, but we are a gifting maternal species, men and women both, because we base our lives are really based on giving and receiving from the maternal model that we receive when we're babies. But then we get away from that into the exchange economy. And if we can realize that giving and receiving is the basic structure, underlying structure of our lives, then we are rooted in a structure that we can call moral, rather than thinking that morality is a category. It's our basic life structure of human life. And I wanted to say that maybe after listening to Phyllis, we can say that the gift economy is in all its ways is just a variation on the theme of breathing.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful, Jen. That's beautiful. I want to check in with Starhawk and see if there's more that came up for you as Phyllis was speaking, and maybe go from there. Starhawk.
Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. That was beautiful and really lovely to have that moment of breathing. And it's something I think about a lot too in terms of evolution, the that Um, the first life kind of on Earth just lived by breaking down big fat molecules in the primal seas, and at a certain point it started to run out of food, and at that point life came up with this miraculous process of photosynthesis. I mean, if you're looking for miracles, I can't imagine a greater miracle than that. Like, how did life, before there was a brain on the planet, figure out how to take air and water and combine them into food using sunlight for energy, right? And it released this gas that was originally toxic to life, that was oxygen, and created the atmosphere that we have now. So we're literally, you know, created by the green things, um, and then life had to figure out how to use that oxygen to break down the food that the green things were making and created this amazing balance that we're all part of with every breath, like you said. And I think a lot about re-indigenization. I'd love to find another word for it that's easier to say. But I actually just wrote a post on Substack on decolonizing value that came out of some experiences I've had co-teaching with some wonderful Indigenous folks. Every summer I've been teaching a permaculture design course up at a place called Our Eco Village in British Columbia. And last year we did one that was on decolonizing our relationship to permaculture and to the earth. And I had a beautiful Indigenous teacher working with me named Patrina Diwali. And listening to her talk about her relationship to her elders and having her elders instruct her in her roles and responsibilities in the family and her community. And it really made me think that when we think about re-indigenization, I think a lot of people, or decolonization, people think of it as a kind of self-development project that you're replacing, you know, bad frameworks of the world with good frameworks, or you're increasing your personal capacity to connect with nature. But actually, indigenous cultures um, are very much about your responsibilities in this intricate web of relationships that are all about giving and taking, and that often mean you're not 100% free to do exactly what you want at any given moment. You have responsibilities that sometimes override your desires. And that's actually, you know, the inherent quality of motherhood or fatherhood or parenthood, um, is that you are actually giving over some of your particular immediate desires to nurture and care for the well-being of another. Um, it's kind of an inherent quality of being an adult, really. Um, and I think what we're seeing now as part of this, you know, tech bro takeover is their unwillingness to have any restrictions or have their power bound by any level of responsibility for others.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like a bunch of 5-year-olds screaming, you know, no, I'm not going to pick up my toys, you know, and how dare you ask me to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so I think that the process of re-indigenization is that connection to the natural world, like actually taking some time each day to be in nature, even if that's just breathing inside your house if you can't go out, or if it's looking at what's growing out of the cracks in the parking lot. There's always nature around somewhere. Um, and but it's also about re-envisioning um, our relationship to others and what we really are responsible for, so that we are constantly in that reciprocity of giving and taking.
Thank you, Starhawk. Jen, did you have something else that you wanted to offer at this moment?
No, thank
Okay. Yes, I wanted to just add that yes, part of the process for people of color is to have to frame the world, see it for what it is, the colonized thinking. But nowadays, I think that people are taking and accepting this responsibility that colonization had effects on everyone, both the colonizers and those who were colonized. And in order for us to understand that relationship, this moment of breath, that moment of actually coming into the present, so that you understand both your own relationship to the effects that are happening in the world. But as Starhawk says, that responsibility to the responsibility, responding effectively to life. And in this moment, these very, very difficult times, we have a responsibility to come to the center of our being and return to the values that we know we hold dearly, rather than reacting, to be able to respond with the ability to affect change, our responsibility. So, what beautiful offerings, my gosh. And how appropriate that this talk shall happen is happening for many before you actually go and actually use your strong outside voice to say no. So with that, I would like to just open it up and to see, I'll start with Liliana and see if there are any questions that actually have come in or comments that you'd like to share, and then I'll go to Judith. So Liliana.
Yes, in this context, can any of the panelists expand on what is the difference between gift and exchange?
I think that should go to Jen first. What do you think, Jen?
Well, exchange is a word that it derives from the market, that we think of in terms of the market now. And I don't think we should really use it with gifting, because gifting is a cycle of reciprocity, but reciprocity and exchange are not the same thing. It's not quid pro quo. I won't give you this unless you give me that. It is a desire to gift also. So the response is putting yourself in harmony with the other person or thing. It's imitating them, not making it conditional upon some gift of theirs for you. So it's not ego oriented. It's more other oriented gifting. That's from my point of view.
Thank you, Jen. Phyllis or Starhawk, do you have anything you want to offer to that from the framework of where you were speaking from today? It'd be great.
To me, it's that word desire that I think there's no question that a responsibility will inevitably require some measure of sacrifice, right? If I'm going to write a book, I can't go out and play. If I'm going to take care of a baby, I can't, get drunk and, whatever.
Well, you could, but you shouldn't.
So, but I mean, I just keep coming back to this experience of desire, that there's a desire to fulfill the responsibility, that the primary energy is one of offerings rather than of sacrifice. But sacrifice sort of comes with the patriarchal culture of Christ on the cross, right? Sacrificing his life to the sins of others, which just never made sense to me because I don't see how you can have vicarious redemption, but okay. Right, the model of sacrifice. And it's yes, but it's not enough because there's the responsibility that comes like the desire to gift rather than exchange. The responsibility is something that one undertakes because one wishes to, because it's an offering, because the effort, the energy, right, is your gift. It's what you can do to make the world a better place. Whether it's the care of a child or the right or a garden or to go to a to go to April 5th and with a sign. That we sense it as an offering, which feels different to me than the burden of a responsibility, which is a sacrifice. And I think one reason that the tech bros, right, they embody this, that they're little boys. I mean, Elon Musk jumping around on the stage with the cheese foam on his head is, or Donald Trump, they are wounded little boys. And they've never been initiated, right? They've never gone through the process of elders educating them in their responsibilities to the community, to themselves, and to the community. So they never grow up. I mean, we live in a right? We live in a culture of little boys, very wounded little boys.
Yeah.
Incapable of accepting responsibilities. And the maternal energy is always, well, if it's healthy, right, there's a sense of responsibility, but the underlying energy that drives the acceptance of responsibility is love. It's love. If everything's healthy, right, and conditions support and like that, it's the natural response of to undertake the responsibility comes with the energy of love and that sense of offering.
Thank you, Phyllis. Let me check in with Starhawk. Is there anything you'd like to offer?
I'll just say, I think giving comes from a sense of abundance and strength. It's, again, that re-envisioning what strength means, that it's not about being able to take what you want from others. It's actually about being able to give and to share because you're coming from a sense of fullness and abundance. And nature provides that abundance. Think about an apple tree. An apple tree provides more apples than you can ever eat, and it all gets recycled. And there is an inherent reciprocity in it. If you're caring for a child, you get back a lot from that experience. And it's not about just, what you think that child's going to do for you in your old age or whether they're going to call you on your birthday or not. It's really about the experience in the moment of the delight and the beauty and the feeling of giving something to the world, this amazing thing, another human being. And that's very different from exchange being transactional. Like, what am I going to get from this? And we live in a world, again, where I think we need to make the moral case for that, that no, it's not okay to just constantly be getting and taking, that we are here to be givers and to be nurturers, and that actually is strength, and that actually is what makes for a good life and a good person.
Thanks, Starhawk. Let me check in with Judith. Judith, did you have a question or a comment you'd like to?
Ruth Murin talks about community gardens as a way to provide food, a way to develop grassroots, although I'm not sure grass is what you want in your community garden, and a way to get yourself out in nature. And I just wondered if you would comment on the concept of community gardens.
Um,
No, no, that's yours.
okay. Yeah, I think they are wonderful places, and teaching permaculture, I've been involved with a lot of them. And we were teaching programs in some of the community gardens in inner city San Francisco for a number of years. And it was sometimes fascinating to see kids and young people and teenagers like actually getting their hands in the dirt, and also to realize the incredible disconnection. I mean, I really literally had one of the kids looking at something when I said, we're going to go pick some of the, some of the lettuce we've grown and we're going to make a salad and eat it. And they're like, we ain't going to eat the shit that grew in the garden. That shit grew in the dirt. And kind of going like, oh, like, where have we come to? I think it's a very important thing. And what I learned was it took more than just teaching kids to garden. We had a wonderful woman who kind of came on board and eventually took over the community garden program. Her name is Brandy Mack, and she just was brilliant with the kids. And she started these programs with the girls where she took them camping. She brought them up to our place in the country, to interact with the animals and do hands-on stuff. There is an organization in the Bay Area called Brown Girls Surf that takes young girls of color and teaches them surfing. And she had these girls out surfing and doing incredible things. And she brought in chefs to cook stuff in the garden because it wasn't just about growing the food. It was actually about people needing to relearn how to eat the food because they were now a couple generations into food deserts where there wasn't a lot of vegetables and fruit and fresh food around, and where they just, had lost their connection to the generation that knew how to cook it and how to eat it and serve it.
Thank you, Starhawk. Phyllis, do you have any comments you want to offer? Okay.
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay, let's check in with Liliana. Do you have another question for us or a comment?
Yeah, Phillips talked about that there's no waste in nature. And Lisa Hayes was asking if she could expand on that.
I'm not a biologist, but there's no waste in nature. One thing becomes another in the mother, one of the earliest chants we learn. And it's just simply true, right? So everything is used to create or sustain life. And so, when an animal poops, it's fertilizer. When something dies, the fungi appear, the miraculous fungi appear to break the parts down, right? You leave a piece of fruit on the table too long, and suddenly there's this fuzzy thing appearing where your banana was. Nature is transmuting. She's engaged always in the process of creation, even where there's destruction or seeming waste. Everything is put to use. those little, when I was a little girl, this is not a biological answer. This is more of an anecdotal one. But when I was a little girl, the worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. That scared the heck out of me, right? That old thing that we used to, and I would think, oh gosh, right? And you'd see some scary movie, the corpse in the ground and the bugs and the where, and it's not, maggots. It's a little creepy, but that everything has a purpose. The question is, what's ours? Everything has a purpose in nature, and a large part of what's going on is the reconstruction, is the deconstruction of former life, or fruit, or poop, or person, right? The breaking of it down into its constituent elements, and then the use of those elements to nourish and create new life. So Mother Earth is the ultimate recycler. She's constantly taking what she's already created, and when the time comes, she takes the essential parts, breaks them down, and turns them back into new life. So, I mean, we create plastic and generate, right? It's not all of this stuff that we do, the machines that we make, the computers. You cannot imagine how many computers I have. I don't know what I'm going to do when we finally move to a small space. I have computers from 1980 because they're full of all this toxic stuff, right? And I know that even if I bring it in and they say they're going to recycle it, that they're not recycling it. So it's sitting in my attic, There's another one, and then there's another one, and then there's another. We create waste. We create things that can't go back into the natural cycle to create life. In fact, we create vast amounts of waste that break the systems of life, that clog those systems, and that kill. And that's waste is something we do. Waste is by definition something that's not useful, right? That does not have a continuing purpose. And in nature, everything has a continuing purpose, and the purpose is the creation of life. One thing becomes another. So our job now is to start to, not just to recycle, but to begin to figure out, how to not generate waste, not just to burn it, as a source of fuel. I mean, I know, these giant mountains where people virtually go skiing now. I drove from one side of Florida to the other, and there were these mountains, and they were garbage, right? From the coasts, from the cities, huge mountains, and they're everywhere, all over, right? So you can tap into that and get some methane gas, but you've still got a mountain of garbage. So this is the thing about nature being our teacher, that we have to learn, not just to reduce and not just to reuse, but to recycle, that everything we make needs to be able to be returned and reused, right? So that's one of our great technological challenges. But with AI,
Oh,
Phyllis.
now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Let me just check in with Starhawk. Starhawk, did you have anything you wanted to offer about that?
No, I think maybe I'll just pass at this point because I'm aware of the time going on, and there may be other questions that we get to.
All right, great. Okay, Judith, you have another comment or question for us?
Patricia's comments on the potential use or the usefulness of starting meetings with the type of breathing exercise that we did. And in another context, I know that a lot of people promote starting meetings with a check-in. So I wonder if you could comment on the concept of at the beginning of a meeting, how to pull the group together as a community.
Yeah, I can say something about that. If you've got the time, like we often start our meetings with a grounding or some kind of meditation. We start all our classes that way. And if you have the time, starting with a check-in, it's one of those ways of showing people that they're valued for more than just instrumentally, that you learned something about each person. And, you know, when you meet regularly, you kind of follow the little unfolding soap opera of everyone's life, and it makes it more interesting. You do have to kind of control it sometimes because it's can be very easy for the check-ins to just take over the whole meeting. But there's also ways to do it very quickly if you don't have time for a full check-in. So if you've got a small enough group, that really works. If you've got a really big group, you might have to divide people into pairs or into smaller groups to check in. Um, but yeah, I really like that. I recommend it.
Thanks, Starhawk. Phyllis, do you have anything?
You know, the larger the group, the less check-in is it's possible, right? But it's a natural part, especially those of us, you know, second wave feminists and you know, consciousness raising groups. That was just an essential part of our awakening. And it is part of that opening of the heart and the forging of the bonds. In the context of a say a group of folks practice it, like my study groups that meet every week, they'll sometimes spend the entire session doing a check-in, talking to each other, and discovering where they are. Years ago, the check-in would be everybody arrives usually an hour early and everybody's talking and they're all talking to each other and they're setting up and they're chatting and they're and then the moment comes where you sort of settle in, right? And it begins. But it always began with practices that connected, like breathing, casting a circle, which we do hand to hand, so the energies get connected just by holding hands. I think that that ritual, right? It's very meaningful for women, and it having been taken away from us, and the way that we are creating them is really significant and valuable. Valuable. And so that repetition of whatever is chosen starts to be infused with meaning that everybody participates in. And it can be whatever a group chooses. I know in some of the women's groups, the goddess groups that were, you know, they would light a candle, ring a bell, you know, and then share. So I think a shared practice is useful, something that's natural and organic and connecting. And I do think sharing is important, but I agree with Starhawk, you know, you can, and I've seen it, like, you know, the entire 2 hours gets taken up in sharing, which is important, but when you've got work to do. So, I mean, one of the great gifts of this particular spiritual path has been the freedom to create meaningful ritual and find me another, you know, sort of spiritual tradition that's been created largely by women. No, right? No. So the fact that we share, that's deeply sacred. You know, one of the things that we always say is that, you know, you are your magic. Your life is your magic. So that sharing is an essential part of, as you were saying, of I'm thinking about your 5 things, right? Of being seen.
Yeah.
Right? That it is that moment of being. That's one of the things I love about working in circle, because everybody is seen. Right? You're not in a pew looking at the back of somebody's head. Everybody sees each other. So finding the structures that work and finding the rituals that are meaningful and the repetition of those, which create a sense of energy and participation and expectation, and then, the contribution. That's one of the things we're doing, and it's profound. I think it's really profound because you take it from there out back. We always say, one of the ways that we end our work together, I do a circle every month, and we begin it by and we've been doing this online where I was skeptical. But instead of the physical presence and the energy that you experience physically when you're together, it's been very from the heart. So people are asked, this is a kind of sharing. I cast this circle, I create this circle, right? I create this community with, and then people, they make their offering with love, with curiosity, with whatever. And at the end, we open our work by asking people to share what they're taking from the time in circle into the world. And so that's, I open this circle taking love. I take love from this circle into the world. So, we found a way of casting circle, and it's been very powerful. So I have confidence that women will find their ways towards the creation of meaningful ritual, which I think it's an essential part of it's an essential part of our activism.
Thank you, Phyllis. Well, I'm also checking the time. We don't have much left, but in closing, I wondered, Starhawk and Phyllis, if you would like to are there any last words that you'd like to put forward? And then I'll go to Jen before I actually close this out. So Starhawk, any closing words?
Yeah, just carrying on from what Phyllis was saying, I think when ritual is done well, it does meet those 5 needs. It creates that sense of safety. I think one of the reasons we do ritual and ceremony is to create a sense of belonging and connection. You give people a chance to be seen and valued. In our tradition where we share leadership a lot and people bring in their own creativity, it gives people a chance, again, to be seen and valued, and also to feel a sense of agency and empowerment. And, we create a framework that gives life a sense of purpose and meaning. So, I am feeling hopeful about today and about turning the tide on this thrashing of the tail of the dinosaur of patriarchy, and maybe finally bringing it down and opening it up for wonderful and new things to happen. And I put into the chat that I'm going to be teaching a class on creating ritual and magic for these times, and I put that into the chat. And it's online, and it's pay what you can, and would love to see some of you there. And thank you,
Thank you so
Jen,
much.
for all that you give and creating these wonderful salons and all your lifetime of work around challenging us to think more about the gift and how that connects to that very primal act we have of creating and nurturing the next generations. And Phyllis, you too. Thank you for all you've done for the community and the cause of religious freedom. Yeah.
Thank you, dear, and all that you've done. And Jen, thank you for this gift, and everybody who's been here receiving and sending energy. I'm worried, but I'm also optimistic. The negative always tells you explicitly what the positive is. That's the thing of it, right? And so, and we have community, we have each other, we have the work. We've been asking a lot, how do we navigate this? And we keep being told, stay focused on the work, stay focused on the work, stay focused on the work, not the chaos, stay focused on the work. And I think that's good advice for all of us, that when we stay focused on the reason that we're here and the work that we have to do and the gifts that we have, to offer, that'll give us the strength to navigate through this. And we support each other through that process. I grieve for the damage that will be done, for the vulnerable, and that, I would like this to be the last time that this is necessary. So we carry the seeds of the future, and we are the seeds of the future. And it's abundant, right? You cut open an apple, you get the 5 seeds, you take 1 seed, you put it in the earth, you take good care of it, up comes a tree with thousands of apples and thousands more seeds. And, the next year there'll be thousands more apples and thousands more seeds. And that's true. We don't live in a scarcity reality. We live in an abundant one. So thank you for being so generous, Genevieve, with this gift.
Phyllis. Genevieve.
Yes, thank you both. And thanks to Letitia also for her continuing commitment and always being there and helping everybody to change their paradigm. And I think this moment is a moment of polarity, which lets us open our eyes to what's not working and to realize something is very wrong and that we need a very deep change. So it's hopeful in that we can try our best to supply directions for that possible change. So maybe it does have its positive side. And I'm thinking maybe we should start all of our gift economy salons with Phyllis's breathing meditation, so that we understand, we have an example of the gift at the beginning of every one. Think about that. Thank you all so much. Gratitude is a great part of the gift economy also, so thank you.
Thank you.
Jen.
Enjoy.
Yes. Yes, I would like to give my thanks to both Starhawk and Phyllis. It's so wonderful to have you in this room. One of my favorite people, Margaret Wheatley, reminds us to create islands of sanity amidst this chaos. And I feel like this meeting today, our salon today, was one of those islands of sanity amidst all of the chaos. So thank you for that. Genevieve, thank you always for all that you have offered in the past and continue to offer into the future to make this world truly a place where the gift economy thrives. Diane, who's behind the scenes, whose face you rarely see, she is the one who is the technical guru behind all of these things to keep our technology together. Judith and Liliana, your eyes scanning the chat and scanning the Q&A. Thank you for that, because when we're on this screen, it's hard to actually see everything that's being written and shared. Our Zooms create a mini community of people, and it's part of the gift of being able to offer this to the world so that future generations will be able to watch and understand what we have come through at this time in 2025, and that they'll know that there are adults who are responsible, who are caring. And while it may seem that this was a difficult time as described in the history books, that behind the scenes, there are people like us who are doing what needs to be done. And I want to just remind people, Genevieve and I actually participated in an event with the Haudenosaunee women and nuns and nuns, sisters the Catholic faith, and also others who didn't have faith but wanted to do something in return for the Native women. And their main focus is the return to mother law. They reminded us that the Haudenosaunee women, the Iroquois Confederacy, that our Constitution in the United States was framed upon everything except women. They took everything except women. And that mother law is what they want us to return to, in the notion of being responsible to the land, responding to the land itself, and hearing and participating in what it means to be good stewards of the land. And in doing that, it is part of that process of decolonization. It's part of the process of understanding the whole framework of the return, going through the gateway, recognizing the awakening to the colonization and how it affected us, decolonizing that, stripping that away, and then quite literally re-indigenizing to the place that you live right now, feeling very connected to the earth. And as a reminder for everything that we do in this abundant and beautiful place. While there are tragedies, a reminder from Phyllis, there is no waste in nature. And the truth of it is, from this one spiritual being, myself, there is no thing that is not goddess. She doesn't make a mistake. I think we are all born here to help support one another, to make that paradigm shift. And I want to thank you all for showing up in this room, and for those of you who are watching this at a later time. Thank you, everyone. Go out and make good trouble. Take good care, everyone.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.
Bye.